The dry wind kicked up dust along Julesburg's Main Street as Nora Fitzgerald stepped off the stagecoach, her heart pounding against her ribcage. Colorado Territory, 1871, a fresh start, but one built upon secrets that threatened to unravel at any moment. She gripped her small valise tighter, the weight of the derringer hidden inside offering little comfort as her eyes scanned the bustling frontier town. "First time in Julesburg, miss." The stagecoach driver tipped his hat as he handed down her trunk. "Yes," she replied curtly, hoping her Eastern accent wouldn't draw too much attention. "Is there a decent boarding house nearby?" The man pointed toward a whitewashed two-story building at the end of the street. "Mrs. Holloway runs a respectable place. Tell her Jake sent you." Nora nodded her thanks and started down the wooden sidewalk, acutely aware of the stares from the townspeople. Her dark blue traveling dress, though dusty from the journey, was finer than most women wore in this rough settlement. She'd need to acquire more practical clothing if she was to blend in. 2 blocks later, she spotted the town's largest saloon, the Golden Spur, its swinging doors constantly in motion as men moved in and out. A man in a black Stetson caught her eye as he emerged, tall and broad-shouldered, his movement that of someone completely at ease with himself and his surroundings. For a brief moment, their gazes locked, and Nora quickly looked away, continuing toward Mrs. Holloway's boarding house. The man was Lucas Blackwell, though few in Julesburg called him anything but Hawk. At 32, he'd earned both his reputation as the most skilled horse trainer in northeastern Colorado and the respect of the townsfolk through fair dealings and a willingness to help those in need. The ranch he'd built 5 miles outside of town represented 7 years of backbreaking work after returning from the war. That evening, after securing a room at the boarding house, Nora made her way to Frederickson's general store. The bell jangled as she entered, drawing the attention of the elderly proprietor. "Evening, miss. Haven't seen you around these parts before," Mr. Frederickson said, adjusting his spectacles. "I arrived today," Nora replied, glancing around the well-stocked store. "I'm looking for employment, actually. Would you happen to know of any opportunities for a woman in town?" Before the shopkeeper could answer, the door opened behind her, and Nora turned to find herself face to face with the man from the saloon. Up close, his eyes were a startling blue beneath the shadow of his hat brim. "Lucas," Mr. Frederickson called out, "this young lady is looking for work. Didn't you mention needing help out at your place?" Lucas studied her for a moment, taking in her fine clothes and delicate hands. "I need someone who can cook for my ranch hands and keep the house in order. It's hard work, miss." "Fitzgerald, Nora Fitzgerald," she supplied, straightening her shoulders. "And I'm not afraid of hard work, Mr. Blackwell, Lucas Blackwell." He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "But most folks call me Hawk." "Because of your eyes," Nora observed before she could stop herself. A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Among other reasons. Can you cook, Miss Fitzgerald?" "I can learn what I don't already know." His eyebrow raised slightly. "Honest, at least. The pay is $15 a month plus room and board. You'd have Sundays to yourself." Nora calculated quickly. The position would provide safety, distance from town, and the chance to save money. "When would you need me to start?" "Tomorrow. I'll come by at 9 to bring you out to the ranch." Lucas replaced his hat and nodded to Mr. Frederickson. "Put Miss Fitzgerald's purchases on my account, Ed." Before Nora could protest, Lucas was out the door, leaving her staring after him. "He's a good man," Mr. Frederickson said quietly. "Lost his wife and baby during the war. Keeps to himself mostly, but there's not a rancher around who wouldn't trust him with their best stock." Nora felt a pang of unease. A private man with keen observation skills was precisely the type she needed to avoid, yet the position seemed perfect for her needs. "I'll need some practical clothes," she said, turning back to the shopkeeper. "And perhaps you could tell me more about Julesburg while I shop." The next morning, Lucas arrived promptly at the boarding house with a wagon. He loaded Nora's trunk while she settled her bill with Mrs. Holloway. The older woman squeezed Nora's hand as she said goodbye. "You be careful out there, dear. A young woman alone needs to watch herself." "I always do," Nora assured her, the weight of the derringer now hidden in her skirt pocket, a constant reminder of that necessity. The journey to the Blackwell ranch took nearly an hour, mostly in silence. Lucas occasionally pointed out landmarks or shared brief information about neighboring properties. Nora took in the vast landscape, so different from the crowded streets of Boston, where she'd spent most of her life. "It's beautiful," she said softly as they crested a hill that revealed a sweeping view of the plains, with the ranch nestled against a backdrop of distant foothills. Lucas glanced at her, noting the genuine appreciation in her expression. "It grows on you. Winters are harsh, though." "I'm from Boston. I know about harsh winters." He guided the wagon down the slope toward a cluster of well-maintained buildings. The main house was larger than Nora had expected, a solid two-story structure with a wide porch. Several outbuildings, corrals, and a large barn completed the homestead. 4 men were working with horses in the nearest corral, and they waved as the wagon approached. "My ranch hands," Lucas explained. "Good men, all of them. They have a bunkhouse by the barn, but they'll take their meals in the main house." He pulled the wagon to a stop and jumped down, coming around to offer Nora assistance. She hesitated only briefly before accepting his hand, acutely aware of the calluses that spoke of years of hard work. "I'll show you the house," he said, retrieving her trunk from the wagon bed and carrying it with ease. Inside, the house was surprisingly welcoming. Simple but solid furniture filled the front room, and a large kitchen dominated the rear of the first floor. A cast-iron stove gleamed with recent polishing, and copper pots hung from a rack above a workbench. "Your room is upstairs," Lucas said, leading the way. "Second door on the right." The bedroom was small but comfortable, with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a washstand. A window overlooked the corrals, allowing plenty of natural light. Lucas set down her trunk. "Get settled in. The men will be expecting dinner at 6. There's a pantry off the kitchen with plenty of supplies." He paused at the door. "One more thing, Miss Fitzgerald. Out here, we value honesty above most things. Whatever brought you to Julesburg is your business, but I expect straightforward dealing on my ranch." Nora met his gaze steadily, despite the flutter of panic in her chest. "I understand, Mr. Blackwell." With a nod, he left her alone. Nora sank onto the bed, taking a deep breath. She'd managed to find exactly what she needed: a position away from town with room and board, but also placed herself directly under the watchful eye of a man who seemed too perceptive for comfort. After unpacking her few belongings, Nora explored the kitchen and pantry. True to Lucas's word, the shelves were well stocked with flour, sugar, dried beans, preserved fruits, and jerky. A root cellar access through a trapdoor in the pantry floor held potatoes, onions, and carrots. By 6 o'clock, Nora had prepared a hearty beef stew with biscuits. Her cooking skills were rudimentary at best. She'd grown up with servants, but she'd watched the family cook enough to understand the basics. The stew was simple but flavorful, and she'd managed not to burn the biscuits. Lucas and his 4 ranch hands filed in promptly at 6, washing up at the pump outside before entering. They introduced themselves as Jed, Tommy, Hank, and Miguel. All were respectful if curious about the new cook. "This is mighty fine, Miss Fitzgerald," Hank said after his first bite of stew. The oldest of the hands at nearly 50, his weathered face creased into a smile. "Thank you," Nora replied, relieved that her efforts were acceptable. Lucas ate quietly, observing more than participating in the lively conversation among his men. Occasionally, Nora would glance up to find his eyes on her, thoughtful and assessing. After dinner, the men returned to their bunkhouse, leaving Nora to clean up. Lucas lingered, helping to clear the table. "You don't need to do that," Nora said, surprised. "My mother taught me that everyone pitches in," he replied simply. "The stew was good. Thank you. I'll improve with practice." He nodded, then leaned against the counter, watching her work. "Where did you learn to cook?" Nora hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "I observed our family cook. And I've been on my own for some time now. A Boston girl ends up in Julesburg by choice. Does anyone end up anywhere by pure choice, Mr. Blackwell? Life has a way of narrowing options until only one path remains." His blue eyes studied her with that unnerving intensity. "Fair enough. I'll show you around the property tomorrow morning. The men take breakfast at 5. With that, he left her alone with her thoughts and the dishes. Nora worked methodically, planning tomorrow's meals and contemplating her situation. Lucas Blackwell was observant and intelligent, dangerous qualities for someone with secrets to keep. Yet something about him made her want to trust him, and that was perhaps the most dangerous thing of all. The following weeks fell into a steady rhythm. Nora rose before dawn to prepare breakfast for the ranch hands, spent her days cooking, cleaning, and learning to manage the household, then prepared dinner in the evenings. Lucas was often away during the day, training horses or handling ranch business, but he always returned for dinner, sometimes bringing news from town or supplies Nora had requested. Slowly, she began to feel more at ease in her role, even finding unexpected satisfaction in creating a comfortable home. The men appreciated her efforts, particularly when she mastered the art of baking fruit pies with preserves from the pantry. One evening in late June, a sudden thunderstorm rolled in just as dinner ended. The men hurried to the barn to secure the animals while Nora cleared the table. Lightning flashed, followed by an immediate crack of thunder that rattled the windows. Rain began to pound the roof, and Nora jumped when the door burst open, admitting a drenched Lucas. "The creek's rising fast," he said, water streaming from his hat and coat. "We need to move the horses from the lower pasture." He grabbed a coil of rope from a hook by the door and turned to leave. "Be careful," Nora called after him, surprising herself with the genuine concern in her voice. He paused, looking back at her, something unreadable in his expression. "Always am." 2 hours later, Nora paced anxiously by the window, watching the rain continue to fall in sheets. The men hadn't returned, and the creek that cut through the property would be a raging torrent by now. She had heated water for coffee and laid out dry clothes, but the weight was becoming unbearable. Finally, she saw lantern light bobbing through the darkness. The door opened, admitting 5 thoroughly soaked and exhausted men. "We got them all," Lucas announced, his voice hoarse from shouting over the storm. "Miguel, get those cuts looked at." The young Mexican cowboy had several bleeding scrapes on his arms from being dragged through brush while rescuing a panicked colt. "I'll tend to him," Nora said, already moving to gather bandages and the bottle of whiskey used for disinfecting wounds. "All of you, get dry before you catch your death." Lucas nodded gratefully, directing the other men to change in the bunkhouse while he went upstairs. Nora cleaned Miguel's cuts, working with an efficiency that didn't escape the cowboy's notice. "You've done this before, Miss Fitzgerald," he observed. "My father was a doctor," she replied automatically, then froze, realizing her mistake. She had told everyone her father was a merchant. Miguel, fortunately, didn't seem to notice the discrepancy, too tired to pay close attention. But when she looked up, she found Lucas standing in the doorway, changed into dry clothes, watching her with those perceptive eyes. Once Miguel was bandaged and sent to the bunkhouse with the others, Lucas accepted the coffee Nora offered. "Thank you for taking care of them," he said, his voice still rough from the night's exertions. "It's the least I could do." She hesitated. "I was worried." Something shifted in his expression. "Were you, of course? You all could have been swept away." He sipped his coffee, studying her over the rim of the cup. "Your father was a doctor." Nora's heart sank. He had heard. "I misspoke. The exhaustion." "Did you?" Lucas set down his cup. "Nora, I've known from the beginning that you're running from something. Your hands are too soft for someone who's worked hard all her life. Your speech, your manners, they don't match the story you've told." Fear gripped her. "Are you firing me?" "No." He surprised her with the immediacy of his answer. "You're an excellent housekeeper and the men respect you. Whatever your past is, it hasn't affected your work here." Relief flooded through her. "Thank you." "But," he continued, "secrets have a way of catching up to people, especially out here where there's nowhere to hide." Nora looked down at her hands, noticing the calluses beginning to form from her weeks of manual labor. "Some secrets are better left buried, Mr. Blackwell." "Lucas," he corrected gently. "After tonight, I think we can dispense with formalities." She looked up, meeting his gaze. "Lucas." Something warm flickered in his eyes before he stood. "Get some rest, Nora. Morning comes early, storm or no storm." The following Sunday, her day off, Nora decided to ride into town for supplies and to post a letter. Lucas offered her the use of a gentle mare named Daisy. And though Nora's riding skills were limited, she managed the journey without incident. Julesburg was busy with Sunday activity, families gathering for church, cowboys enjoying their day off, and merchants taking advantage of the increased foot traffic. Nora delivered her shopping list to Mr. Frederickson, then made her way to the post office. As she exited with her errand complete, a voice called out from across the street. "Well, look who we have here." Nora froze, her blood turning to ice as she recognized Theodore Hampton, a business associate of her late husband. He crossed the street, his expensive suit and gold watch chain marking him as different from the typical Julesburg resident. "Mrs. Bedford, isn't it? Or are you using another name these days?" His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You're mistaken, sir," Nora replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "My name is Fitzgerald." Hampton laughed. "Oh, that's good. Very convincing. But I'd recognize James Bedford's beautiful widow anywhere." He lowered his voice. "Especially one who disappeared with $50,000 of investment money." "I don't know what you're talking about," Nora said, glancing around nervously. "Please excuse me." As she tried to move past him, Hampton grabbed her arm. "Not so fast, my dear. We have unfinished business." The lady asked to be excused. Nora nearly sagged with relief at the sound of Lucas's voice. He stood a few feet away, having just emerged from the bank across the street. Hampton released her arm but didn't back away. "This is a private conversation, friend." "Doesn't look private to me," Lucas replied, stepping closer. "Looks like you're harassing my housekeeper." "Housekeeper?" Hampton laughed. "Is that what she told you? This woman is Nora Bedford, widow of James Bedford, who embezzled $50,000 from our investment firm in Boston before conveniently dying of a heart attack. She disappeared with the money shortly after." Lucas's expression remained impassive as he turned to Nora. "Is that true?" Nora felt the world tilting beneath her feet. Lucas, I can explain." "I bet you can," Hampton interjected. "She's quite good at explanations, our Mrs. Bedford." "That's enough," Lucas said sharply. Miss Fitzgerald works for me, and whatever her past may be, she's under my protection while she does. He turned to Nora. We should head back to the ranch. Your supplies are loaded. Grateful for the escape, Nora nodded. Lucas guided her toward their horses, his hand steady at the small of her back. This isn't over, Hampton called after them. The law will be very interested in her whereabouts. The ride back to the ranch was tense with unspoken questions. When they finally arrived, Lucas helped unload the supplies in silence. Once everything was put away, he turned to her. I think it's time for that explanation. Nora nodded, her hands trembling slightly. Not here. Can we walk? Lucas led her to a quiet spot by the creek, now returned to its normal peaceful flow after the storm. They sat on a fallen log, the late afternoon sun dappling through the cottonwood leaves above them. My name is Nora Bedford, she began. I was born Nora Fitzgerald, but I married James Bedford when I was 19. He was charming, successful, and 30 years my senior. Lucas's eyebrow raised at this, but he remained silent. It wasn't until after we were married that I discovered he was a fraud. He used his investment firm to swindle people out of their life savings, including my father, who died penniless as a result. She twisted her hands in her lap. James was cruel behind closed doors. When I threatened to expose him, he locked me in our home for weeks. How did he die? Lucas asked quietly. Heart attack, just as Mr. Hampton said, but he's wrong about the money. I didn't take it. She looked up at Lucas. James kept detailed ledgers. After he died, I found them and discovered that Hampton and several others were complicit in the fraud. The $50,000 is their share of stolen money, hidden in a bank account in New York. And they think you have it. Yes. I took the ledgers as proof and fled Boston. I intended to turn them over to authorities, but Hampton's associates include powerful men, including judges and police officials. One tried to kill me in Chicago. She unconsciously touched her side where a thin scar remained from the knife attack. I've been running ever since. Where are the ledgers now? Hidden in my room, sewn into the lining of my trunk. Lucas was quiet for a long moment, processing her story. You could have told me this from the beginning. Could I? Nora challenged. A stranger appears on your doorstep with a tale of fraud and murder. You would have sent me packing. Maybe, he conceded. But lies don't build trust, Nora. I didn't lie about who I am, she insisted. Only about my circumstances. And your father being a doctor, she sighed. That was true. Before James ruined him, my father was a respected physician in Boston. Lucas stood, pacing along the creek bank. Hampton will come for you. Men like that don't give up easily. I know. Nora's voice was small. I should leave Julesburg. I've put you and your men in danger just by being here. No. The firmness in his voice surprised her. Running won't solve this. If what you say is true, those ledgers are evidence that could clear your name and bring Hampton and his associates to justice. Hope, a feeling Nora had nearly forgotten, flickered to life. The territorial marshal might help, but I'd need to reach Denver. Marshal Jenkins is a good man. I served with his brother during the war. Lucas turned to face her. We'll take the ledgers to Denver together. Why would you risk yourself for me? His expression softened. Because in the weeks you've been here, I've seen who you are. You care for my men like family. You work without complaint. You worried when we were caught in the storm. He stepped closer. The woman I've come to know isn't a thief or a liar at heart. Tears welled in Nora's eyes. I'm not the woman you think I am, she warned, her voice breaking. I've done things I'm not proud of to survive. Lucas reached out, gently brushing a tear from her cheek. Show me who you are, then, not who circumstances forced you to be. The tenderness in his touch nearly undid her. For so long, she'd been alone with her fear and guilt. I don't know if I remember anymore. I see glimpses of her every day, he said softly. We leave for Denver tomorrow. Tonight, get your ledgers ready. When Lucas left to inform his men of their departure, Nora returned to her room and retrieved the ledgers from their hiding place. 3 small books, filled with James's precise handwriting, documenting years of fraud and the names of everyone involved. As she wrapped them in oilcloth for protection, Nora heard a commotion from outside. Looking through her window, she saw Theodore Hampton and 3 armed men approaching the house. Lucas and his ranch hands were already on the porch, forming a barrier. Heart racing, Nora tucked the ledgers into a saddlebag and grabbed her derringer. By the time she reached the porch, tensions were high. This doesn't concern you, Blackwell, Hampton was saying. We only want what belongs to us. Nothing here belongs to you, Lucas replied calmly, though Nora could see his hand resting near his holstered pistol. Hampton sneered. The woman is a thief and a murderer. Murderer? Nora stepped forward, anger overcoming her fear. Is that the story you're telling now, Theodore? My husband died of a heart attack with 3 doctors as witnesses. After you poisoned him, Hampton accused. We know you mixed digitalis in his tea. His heart gave out because you wanted his money. That's a lie, gasps rose from the ranch hands. James was embezzling from his clients for years. You were his partner in it. The ledgers prove everything. Hampton's face contorted with rage. Give me those ledgers, you little. He reached for his gun, but Lucas was faster. A single shot knocked the weapon from Hampton's hand, causing him to howl in pain. The next one won't be so gentle, Lucas warned, his pistol now aimed at Hampton's chest. Jed, relieve these gentlemen of their weapons. The oldest ranch hand moved forward, collecting guns from Hampton's stunned companions. This is your chance to leave my property peacefully, Lucas continued. Otherwise, you'll be delivered to the sheriff in considerably worse condition. Hampton cradled his bleeding hand. This isn't over, Bedford, not by a long shot. The name is Blackwell, Lucas corrected, and she's under my protection. Once Hampton and his men had departed, Lucas turned to Nora. We need to move now, not tomorrow. They'll be back with more men. Within an hour, they were on their way to Denver, the precious ledgers secure in Lucas's saddlebags. They rode hard until nightfall, making camp in a sheltered ravine where their fire wouldn't be visible from a distance. As they sat beside the small fire, Nora studied Lucas's profile in the flickering light. Why are you really helping me? The truth. He poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks flying upward. When I came back from the war, my wife Sarah was 7 months pregnant. I'd been gone for 3 years, fighting for the Union. She was so happy to see me home safely. His voice grew softer. 3 weeks later, outlaws raided our small farm while I was in town. They took what little we had, but Sarah fought back. They beat her so badly she lost the baby and died 2 days later. Lucas, I'm so sorry, Nora whispered. I tracked them for months, found them one by one. I'm not proud of what I did, but I couldn't let them hurt anyone else. He looked up at her. So when you ask why I'm helping you, it's because I know what it's like to be hunted, to have everything taken from you by men who think their greed gives them the right. Nora moved closer, hesitantly placing her hand over his. We're quite a pair, aren't we? Both running from our pasts. Maybe it's time we both stopped running. The journey to Denver took 3 days of hard riding, with constant vigilance for pursuit. They reached the territorial marshal's office on the 4th day, exhausted but determined. Marshal Jenkins, a gruff man with a silver beard, listened to their story with increasing interest, particularly when Nora produced the ledgers. After examining the evidence, he looked up with grim satisfaction. These men have been operating across several states. We've suspected something like this for years, but could never get solid evidence. He closed the ledger. "Mrs. Bedford, you've done a public service by bringing these to me." "Will it be enough to clear my name?" Nora asked anxiously. "More than enough. I'll send telegrams to Boston immediately." "Hampton and his associates will be arrested within days." He rubbed his beard thoughtfully. "You'll need to testify, of course, but I can arrange protection." Lucas, who had remained silent during most of the interview, spoke up. "She'll have my protection as well." The marshal's eyes shifted between them, a hint of understanding in his weathered face. "I don't doubt it, Blackwell. You always were stubborn about protecting what's yours." 2 weeks later, they returned to Julesburg with news that Hampton and 6 others had been arrested in Boston, Chicago, and St. Louis. The telegraph office posted a notice that Nora Bedford had been officially cleared of all suspicion in her husband's death, and that the stolen funds were being returned to the victims of the investment fraud. As they approached the Blackwell ranch in the fading light, Nora felt a strange mixture of relief and uncertainty. "What happens now?" she asked. Lucas reined his horse to a stop, turning to face her. "That depends on you. Your name is cleared. You're free to go anywhere, start any life you choose." The thought of leaving brought an unexpected ache to her chest. "And if I wanted to stay?" Something that looked like hope flickered in Lucas's blue eyes. "As my housekeeper." "No," Nora said softly, "not as your housekeeper." Lucas dismounted and came to help her down from her horse, but instead of stepping back, he kept his hands at her waist. "These past weeks have shown me something I never thought I'd feel again. You brought life back into my home, Nora. Into me." "I was so broken when I came here," she admitted, her hands resting lightly on his chest. "Running, hiding, afraid to trust anyone, but you saw through all of that." "I saw you," he corrected. "The real Nora beneath the fear and pain." His hand gently cupped her cheek. "And I'd very much like to keep seeing her, if she's willing to stay." In answer, Nora rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. The kiss was gentle at first, then deepened as years of loneliness and longing gave way to newfound hope. When they finally parted, both were breathless. "Is that a yes?" Lucas asked, a smile playing at his lips. "It's a yes," Nora confirmed. "But I'm still not quite the woman you think I am. I have more to learn, more growing to do." Lucas took her hand, leading her toward the house that had become more of a home than she'd ever known. "Then we'll learn together. Show me who you are, Nora Fitzgerald Bedford, and I'll show you who I can be with you by my side." 3 months later, on a crisp October morning, Nora stood beside Lucas in the small church in Julesburg, exchanging vows before the minister, and a gathering of friends that included all the ranch hands, Mr. Frederickson, Mrs. Holloway, and even Marshal Jenkins, who had traveled from Denver for the occasion. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "Mr. and Mrs. Lucas Blackwell." As Lucas kissed his bride, cheers erupted from the assembled guests. The celebration continued at the ranch, where tables groaned under the weight of food prepared by the women of Julesburg, who had taken Nora into their community once her true story became known. Later that evening, as the last guests departed, and the newlyweds stood on their porch watching the sunset paint the Colorado sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Lucas wrapped his arm around Nora's waist. "Happy, Mrs. Blackwell." "More than I ever thought possible," she replied, leaning into his embrace. "A year ago I couldn't imagine feeling safe again, much less loved. You are both," he assured her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "And more." Spring brought new life to the Blackwell ranch, calves in the pastures, foals in the stables, and wildflowers carpeting the prairie. It also brought news from Boston that the last of Hampton's associates had been convicted, officially closing that chapter of Nora's life. "We should celebrate," Lucas suggested as they sat on the porch after dinner watching the sunset. "A fresh start." "I've been thinking about fresh starts," Nora said, a mysterious smile playing at her lips. "And new beginnings." Lucas raised an eyebrow. "What are you planning, wife?" In answer, Nora took his hand and placed it gently on her still flat stomach. "We're going to have a new beginning in about 7 months. Joy spread across Lucas's face as the meaning of her words sank in. "A baby, you're sure?" Dr. Williams confirmed it yesterday in town. Her eyes filled with happy tears. "I wanted to be certain before I told you." Lucas pulled her into his arms, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "You continue to amaze me, Nora Blackwell." "I told you I wasn't the woman you thought I was," she teased, echoing her words from almost a year ago. "And I told you to show me who you are," he replied, his voice husky with emotion. "You've shown me a woman stronger and more loving than I could have imagined." On a bright November day, with the first dusting of snow on the distant mountains, Nora gave birth to a healthy son they named Samuel James Blackwell. Lucas paced anxiously outside their bedroom during the delivery, nearly wearing a path in the floorboards until Dr. Williams emerged with the news. "A fine boy," the doctor announced, "and your wife is doing well." When Lucas entered the bedroom, the sight of Nora cradling their tiny son in her arms nearly brought him to his knees. She looked up with tired eyes but a radiant smile. "Come meet your son," she whispered. Lucas sat carefully on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the perfect small face peering up at him from the bundle of blankets. "He's beautiful," he managed, his voice thick with emotion. "Just like his mother." "He has your eyes," Nora said, tracing a gentle finger along the baby's cheek. "I think he'll have your stubborn nature too." Lucas laughed softly. "God help us all if he inherits both our stubborn streaks." As winter settled over the Colorado plains, the Blackwell household adjusted to life with a newborn. The ranch hands doted on young Samuel, bringing hand-carved wooden toys and telling him stories of brave cowboys and wild mustangs, even though he was far too young to understand. On Christmas Eve, with Samuel sleeping peacefully in his cradle, Lucas and Nora sat before the fireplace in the main room, a small decorated pine tree standing in the corner. "I have something for you," Lucas said, reaching into his pocket and withdrawing a small velvet pouch. "I meant to give this to you on our wedding day, but it wasn't ready yet." Nora opened the pouch, gasping as a delicate gold locket fell into her palm. When she opened it, she found a tiny portrait of Lucas on one side with space waiting on the other. "For Samuel," Lucas explained. "When we get to Denver in the spring, we'll have his portrait made to complete it." "It's perfect," Nora whispered, tears of happiness blurring her vision. "This whole year has been more than I deserved." Lucas took her hands in his. "You deserve every happiness, Nora. You taught me how to live again, how to hope again." He kissed her softly. "For a woman who claimed she wasn't who I thought, you've proven to be even more. And you, Lucas Blackwell, are exactly the man I hoped existed but never thought I'd find." As they held each other before the crackling fire, snow beginning to fall gently outside the windows, Nora reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From a frightened widow on the run to a beloved wife and mother, she had found not just safety but true happiness on the Colorado frontier. 3 years later, the Blackwell Ranch had grown in prosperity and size. Lucas's reputation as a horse trainer had spread throughout the territory, bringing clients from as far as California and Texas. Nora had established a small school on the property, teaching not only Samuel and their 1-year-old daughter, Elena, but also the children of neighboring ranchers and the ranch hands who wanted to improve their reading and writing. On a warm summer evening, as fireflies began to dance over the pastures, Lucas found Nora sitting on their porch swing, watching Samuel chase the glowing insects while baby Elena slept in her lap. "Quite a sight," "Isn't it?" he said, settling beside her and draping his arm around her shoulders. "The most beautiful in the world," Nora agreed, leaning against him. "I had a letter from Marshal Jenkins today. He's retiring next month and plans to visit us on his way to California." "Good man, Jenkins. We owe him a lot," Nora nodded. "Without him, I might still be running." She looked up at the man who had become her strength and her joy. "Thank you for seeing me, Lucas. The real me, even when I was too afraid to show her." He smiled, the lines around his eyes crinkling with affection as he pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Thank you for trusting me enough to stay and build this life with me." He gestured toward their son, now squealing with delight as he captured a firefly in his cupped hands, "for giving me a family I never thought I'd have." As the sun set over the Colorado plains, painting the sky in gold and crimson, Nora Blackwell knew she had finally found where she belonged. No longer running, no longer hiding, but standing proudly as the woman she was always meant to be loved, respected, and free to define herself not by her past, but by the life she chose to create. "I love you, Lucas," she whispered, the words still feeling like a precious gift after years of fear had stolen her ability to trust. "And I love you, Nora," he replied simply, the truth of it evident in every gentle touch and steady gaze. Together they watched their son release the firefly, its glow rising up to join others in the gathering twilight's small lights of hope against the darkness, just as they had been for each other when it mattered most.